Yeah, so welcome again to Learn Julia with us. I'm Kyla and this is Julia. We are the two kind of leaders of this workshop, and we called it Learn Julia with us for a very purposeful reason, because we are also learning Julia, and Julia and I wanted a reason to stay motivated with learning Julia, and so that's why we got started with this. So today we're going to do the very basics of Julia. We want to start with telling you about us, of course, who we are and what brought us here. We want to ask a little bit about you and just get an idea for the group and what your needs are or your desires. We want to talk about Julia as a language, why we think it's great. And then we're just going to show a few basic things about getting started with Julia, including installing it, working in the Julia console, and working in a couple of different environments with Julia. And then, so the nitty gritty of the kind of coding part, we're going to start with a little bit in our upcoming events. So we are doing this once a month, always on a Thursday night at the same time, nighttime for us. The next one will be on March 17th. Then we have one on April 14th and May 12th. So those are all already scheduled on our meetup page, but you'll get a little reminder about them when they're announced. And we have kind of a vague idea of what topics we're going to cover, but some of that might change. So we're basically going to take it at a pretty slow pace, a very easy, if you have a master's thesis in software engineering in Julia due in 6 weeks, this might not be the course for you. We're going to take it, nice and relaxed through getting acquainted with Julia. Yeah, so who are we? I'm Kyla, of course, and this is Julia. You can call her Julia or Julia. I call her Julia because she's German and it helps us distinguish between Julia and Julia, the programming language. And we are two PhD students. We both do linguistics, and we're located at the University of Freiburg in Germany. So for those who don't know Freiburg, we're right down here in the southwest corner, quite close to both France and Switzerland in the Black Forest region of Germany. And Julia and I are big fans of the language R. That's actually where we got started with doing this kind of workshop. We co-organize Our Ladies Freiburg, and we do workshops kind of like this one, except for on topics related to R, twice a month. There, you can look us up if that's something that you also are interested in. But that's really what brought us to this style of workshop, because we really love doing this kind of community teaching and learning together. And we have recently discovered the joys of Julia, so just in the past year or so. So we generally use Julia for academic research. And we use it for modeling, so fitting bigger models than we could, or more complex models than is easy for us to do in R. So that's how we've gotten into Julia, but we are excited to learn more Julia together in this group. Yeah, and so we have previous experience in R. We also have experience with Python, and we are looking to grow our Julia knowledge together in this. And we're going to be using a lot of the resources that are available in the Julia community for that. Yeah, so now we want to know a little bit about who is here tonight. I'm going to pause the recording.
Thank you for thanks for participating, and we'll restart the recording now.
Yeah, great. So we saw that we had a lot of interest in Julia. We have a group that has, we're just getting started, and that's really perfect. So I'll tell you a little bit about Julia and kind of why we're interested in it. And Julia is a general purpose programming language, so you can use it for a lot of very diverse applications. But it's popular in the data science communities, and we saw from the group that there's a lot of interest in data analysis and academic analysis, or different types of data processing applications. And this is perfect for Julia because Julia was built with data science and machine learning in mind. So while it can do a lot of other things, it really has a strong basis in these topics. Like R and Python, Julia is free, it's open source. Most of it is hosted on GitHub, and packages can be contributed by the whole community. And it was developed to be readable like Python, so the syntax is pretty easy to work with, but it's compiled really quickly, so it has comparable performance, and in some cases even better performance than some of the lower level languages like C. And it's a young programming language. I think it just turned 10 years old like this week or last week, which in comparison, a language like R is about 30 years old. We have a little note with the Julia community prefers you don't gender the language Julia, so just call it the Julia language or it. Don't try not to use gendered pronouns for it, but yes. Then I wanted to show just a couple. This is some benchmarks from the Julia website, and my formatting got a bit off here, but basically they're little benchmarks that show the performance of different programming languages. So right here we have Julia on the left, and R and Python are over here on the right, and there's a couple other languages mixed in here too. So you can see, because this is in scales of order of magnitude, that Julia is way faster than R, for example. I don't know if that really surprises that many people. Maybe it surprises you. If you're a user of R, maybe it does not surprise you at all. It's also faster than languages like Python. So it's really fast. Like I said a moment ago, it's really readable. It also has a strong emphasis on reproducible methods or environments that you can use Julia in that make it reproducible, for example, in an academic context, if you want reproducible research. On the data science side, it can handle really complex models. It can handle really a lot of what you throw at it. And Julia is really easy to integrate with other programming languages. So there's a lot of packages that will make it easy for you to use some of your favorite features from R, Python, for example. So before we get to working with Julia, I want to give you a moment to install Julia if you don't have it installed yet. So you don't have to have it installed yet. And so for this, we're going to go over to the Julia website. What you can see here is just julialang.org. And if you go over here and under downloads, if you go to julialang.org, you land on the Julia programming language homepage. And up here on the top bar, we have download Julia. And downloading Julia is relatively straightforward as far as we have seen so far, but let us know. We're going to stick around after the talk if you have any problems with installation. But hopefully it will go easily. And you can pick, so all you do is pick your system from the list here, and then you download the installer. So for example, I'm on a Mac. I would download this DMG file. And there's also a help page if you click on help. So for example, here for Mac, it lets you know that you install Julia just like any other Mac software by dragging it to the application folder. And then you can open it from your applications list. And I believe Julia here is on Windows. Is there anything special to say about Windows?
Well, if you click on help next to Windows as well. So for Windows, you just download this installer, you save it wherever you like, and then you execute it, it'll run. And then one thing I'd like to point out here is for Windows that there's a screenshot here. This is what the installer is going to look like. There's two options, creating a desktop shortcut or start menu entry. That's kind of optional. That's just if you want to find it more quickly. But the third one, you should tick that. So add Julia to path. So that's essentially going to prevent a couple of problems from occurring or potentially occurring later on. So that's always a good idea to tick that straight away. And that's pretty much all you need to know. And then the installation just runs as you would install kind of any other program or any other app. And we'll show you how to start it and use it in a second.
Yes, exactly. So, and I think the Mac has an optional instructions here also for adding Julia to the path. So that's something you would have to do in the command line. You don't need to do that to work with Julia in general, but it's like Julia said, it's helpful for other applications or might prevent some problems. Great. Okay, so maybe we'll just pause for a couple minutes here and let you get installed. Maybe let us know in the chat if you have it installed, or if you're working on installing it. And we'll just pause for a moment. If you've already installed it, you can grab coffee real quick, and we'll reconvene in a couple minutes. We need help later. Okay, so now we have Julia installed, and I wanted to have both these windows open, so hopefully it's not too confusing that you see my video here. But now if you have it installed, you should be able to find Julia in your program list. So here is the Julia logo for me. And when I click on that, I get a little terminal application. Oops. I want to show this. Okay. So I get on Mac here, it looks like a terminal application. It should look similar on a Windows PC as well. So my computer is recognizing it's after dark here, so it's gone into dark mode in the terminal. But you see, it looks like the terminal, but it has the Julia logo. And this is called the Julia REPL, which stands for the read eval print loop, or evaluate print loop. This is your most basic way of interfacing with Julia. So this is the kind of lowest tech, most direct way to work with Julia on your computer. You can see you can probably already see that there's not really that many bells and whistles, but this is how it comes installed on your computer. There's several other ways that you can work with Julia, and some of those we'll show you in a bit. So Julia will show you a couple of different ways, but I'm going to show you the most basic way first. You might also see, if you work with Julia with other people, you may see the form of a Julia script, which is generally a file that ends in .jl. There's Julia Markdown files, which combine text with blocks of Julia code. Those would be .jmd files. And there's different IDEs, which stands for interactive developer environments, that you can work with it in. That would be something that gives you a few more benefits. Like they might be able to help you debug, or you might be able to test parts of your code, or might give you some help with syntax. So we'll show you one of those briefly. And then what we're going to be doing for most of this course is using something called a Pluto Notebook. And this is in some ways one of the higher tech, more bells and whistles ways to work with Julia. And it's great for teaching, but also for doing reproducible reports, because you can combine text with blocks of code, and you can run single lines of code and see the output of them immediately right next to the code. So we'll look at that in a moment, but just a preview of what's coming. But like I said, I want to start with looking here in this Julia REPL. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the text on this bigger. Oh, I can. Good. Just to make sure everybody can see it. So you see that the line is headed with Julia. That tells us that we're working with Julia. And we can do basic stuff in here. Anything that Julia can do, we could do from this line. It's not something we're going to do very often, because you really can only put in like one line of code and then run it and get the output. It's not something where you can easily develop an entire analysis. But we can do basic things. So if you open up your Julia REPL like this, you can try different math problems, for example. And you'll see, of course, Julia can handle any sort of complex or random math stuff pretty easily. There's no math problem that's gonna stump it. So yeah, you can play around with what Julia can do in terms of basic math. And you could also run Julia commands in this line if you wanted to. That will work better with things that are pretty simple. But basically, when you're working here, it's always working in the Julia language. But this REPL, so this little terminal, has some cool other features. One of them is if you press question mark. So what I'm doing here is pressing question mark on my keyboard, and that will enter me into the help area of Julia. So you could look up about like if you see a command and you don't know what it means, like sqrt, you could type it in the help section and it would let you know that it returns the square root of a number. And it can give you certain errors if you give it a negative number, for example. And it gives you some examples. So you could try, here it gives you just all sorts of examples of what code you could give and what it would give as a return. And there's a whole bunch of other information. So this is a really easy way to access, if you don't know about a command, what it does. You can press question mark again, and you can see instantly that this changes to help. So now that we've learned that this is the square root, for example, we could try square root of 10,000, for example, and we could get the answer to that. So just question mark. And to get out of the help section, you press the backspace when there's nothing on the line. So question mark, backspace, question mark, backspace. So that's a cool built-in feature of the Julia REPL. And reading the help pages can be kind of overwhelming. Like right now, this is probably looks a little bit overwhelming. It looks overwhelming to me too. And that's something that we are going to come back on over and over again, is kind of practicing reading the documentation and checking for help and finding things and finding out how to do something that we don't know in Julia. Okay, so that's one thing we can do in the REPL is we can, or that's two things really. One is we can run Julia code, and two is we can look up the help documents about a command. Were there any questions? That's awesome chat activity. No, looking good. Okay. So then the other feature of the REPL that I want to show you today is the package manager. And for this, you press, my keyboard doesn't have this. Yeah, you press the square bracket. This kind of, I guess it's the right square bracket. And when you press it on the keyboard, you should instantly go into this package manager part of the console. So again, when you're in the normal Julia REPL, you just press this right square bracket, and it should change the prompt at the beginning of the line to PKG. So I put that. This is also on the slides if you want to check at it later. So you're in the package manager now. And what this is, or why we have a package manager, is because the Julia language has certain core components that are always involved. So if you just load Julia, you get basic abilities like the ability to take square roots or do basic math. But the real wealth and diversity of Julia comes when you install different packages. And packages can be developed by anyone in the community. There are some that are going to be really major that you're going to load most times that you use Julia. There's others that might be specific to climate modeling, for example, or any sort of very specific application you might have. There may be a package for that. And so you can think of packages as like add-ons to Julia that extend its functionality beyond its core. And in general, Julia is a language that has a relatively smaller core and relies a lot on packages, or packages can be really, that's where you're really going to get the power. Okay, so if you're in the package manager, what you can do here is add packages to your base directory. So basically to your default setup for Julia. You can also update packages here. So when the developers release new versions on GitHub and make official updates to their packages, you can come back over here and update your version to make sure you have all the latest functionality. So how do we do that? So first, for tonight, what we want to have you try is installing a package called Pluto. Pluto is the package that runs Pluto Notebooks, which I talked about earlier as one of our teaching resources. So let's go ahead and add that. When you're in the package manager, so the line has to start with PKG, then you can say add Pluto, and you can run that line. I already have it. Well, I'll try it. Okay, so it's going to update for me. So go into your Julia REPL now and go ahead and enter the package manager by typing this right-handed square bracket, and then try running this line of add Pluto. And it probably will take a little while for this to load. So give it a few moments to load. You're probably going to get more text than me because I already had Pluto and I actually updated it last night. So it has no work to do, but you'll probably get a very long list with some little spinners and all sorts of text coming up that will be adding this package to your Julia installation. So again, I'll just pause for a few minutes to let you catch up with that, and let us know in the chat if you have questions. And maybe one last thing to say about the REPL before we carry on is that just like adding packages, you can also update packages. So for example, if you have Pluto installed and you installed it like a while ago, you might want to give it an update by just running update Pluto. And that's something you may need to do at various times. But yeah, so that's the REPL. And now Julia is going to show you a couple ways that you might work with Julia in the real world, so not just in single lines in the terminal.
Yeah, thanks, Kyla. I'm going to, you should also now be able to see what it looks like on Windows, which is not, very different from what it looked like on Mac. And it sounds like you all found it, but if just in case, you can always click on Start, and then Julia will be here at the top because I just installed or reinstalled it, or you can also just start typing to find it. So just in case you got lost there, this is how you can find it and start it. And I'm in the REPL first. And we mentioned that there are these kind of text editors, code editors like Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to just really quickly show you that. We're not going to use it much, or we're not really going to use it for this workshop. We're going to use Pluto Notebooks, which I'll show you afterwards, but you might see people using these in case you watch any YouTube videos, other tutorials. People use Visual Studio Code a lot. So VS Code is a general purpose text editor or coding kind of editor. So this is not for Julia specifically. I also use this for Python a lot, and you can use it for lots of different languages actually. So I'm just going to show you that you don't need to install it. I just want you to kind of recognize it when people are using it and not be, confused. So when I start a new script here, so this is going to be my script up here, and this down here is basically our Julia REPL again, right? So the script has this advantage that I can save what I've done. So next time I want to continue coding, I can return to it, I can save it somewhere, open it, make changes, add to it, and so on. So if you're familiar with Python or R, right, you'll be familiar with this idea of a script. So VS Code, because it's good for a bunch of different languages, you can use a bunch of different languages in it, will ask me to select a language so it knows what language it's in, so it knows how to interpret the commands properly and to help me with it. So I can select a language. Yeah, so I can select a language here. I can just start typing Julia. It'll come up, and the reason why it comes up is because I have extensions installed that help me interpret this Julia code. Yeah, so the Julia language support is what I have installed. This is going to kind of try to warn me if I make a mistake. Yeah, that's what that's for. So here in my script, I can also do these like little math operations. I can do maybe a print statement, and don't worry too much about what this code all does and means. We'll get into that kind of next time and the next times. This is just to kind of show you what it looks like. And if I want to run that, I can just I can hold Shift and then hit Enter. And you can see it puts the result in the same line, and it also puts it here in the terminal. Or yeah, it puts it here in the terminal as well. And same if I run this line, so it just printed hi, and it just tells me, yes, I ran that line, and it printed here in the terminal, right? And what I mentioned before, this kind of trying to help me if I make a mistake, I can try and show that. So I think in Julia, you can do print or printl, but it shouldn't know what print line is. So when I try to run that, you can see it turns red and it tells me undefined variable error, print line not defined. So it's basically trying to tell me this is not correct, something's wrong here. So it's trying to help me figure out where my code is breaking, right? And then I could, if I wanted to, I could save this script and I can just kind of quickly simulate that. And here you can see, sorry if this is a bit small, but you can see that the ending for anything associated with Julia, so files associated with Julia, is .jl, right? So here I'm calling it test script.jl. I'm just saving that somewhere. And you can see it changed the name up here to test script.jl, name of the file. So anything associated with Julia is going to have that JL ending. Right, so that's VS Code, just very quickly, just in case you see that. But what we want to use is actually Pluto Notebooks, and I'll show you why. So in Visual Studio Code, everything that you type in here is going to be interpreted as code, and it's trying to run that. It's going to try to execute that. But in teaching, we often want to make comments. We often want to say, so I'll just say this is our first code. Right, so we often want to describe what's happening. So we can do that in a script by using this hashtag to say this line is a comment, right? This is not going to be run, right? This is not, nothing's happening if I try to run that, because it's just, it knows that this is just a comment, this should be ignored, it's going to run the next line instead. But if you imagine, we're trying to explain a lot when we teach this. So this is going to be a lot of commented outlines. It's going to look a bit messy. So instead, we want to use Pluto, which is going to look much nicer. So I'm going to switch back to the REPL to start Pluto. So you installed it. And now in Julia, so not in the package manager, you can just say import. Oops, spelling is important. So you can just say import Pluto, run that. Doesn't say anything, which is fine. So now the package is loaded. We installed it, now we loaded it. So you only need to install it once, maybe once in a while you need to update it, but you only need to install it once generally. And then, but every time you use it, you need to import it. And that's kind of, if you know R or Python, it's kind of a similar idea. So we've imported it, and now we can say pluto.run, and then just empty brackets. So pluto.run. Going to run that, and that's going to take a second. And then it's going to actually open in my browser. So this is a browser-based notebook. The recommendation is that you use Firefox or Chrome for this. I think it's just going to open in your standard browser. So try that, and here we are. It's still loading. So feel free to try that, because it's going to take a couple of seconds the first time you do it to open. And yes, I know I have a lot of tabs. At some point, I might clean them up, but probably not. Okay. So here, this is kind of the landing page of these Pluto notebooks. And they offer you a couple of options here. So you can open a sample where they've done a couple of things to show what these notebooks can do. You can create a new one, or you can open a notebook. So here you can either enter a path on your computer or a URL. And this is how we plan on distributing kind of teaching material. So we'll give you a GitHub file, and then you can load it in like this. But actually, we're going to just create a new notebook for now. So click on this. And again, it's going to take a little bit to do that, to open our new notebook, and then I'm going to show you how to work with it. And the reason why, again, we've picked Pluto for this, so there are other alternatives. There's also Jupyter, but Pluto is all in Julia and also has a couple of other cool features, one of which I'm going to quickly show you today. But essentially, the idea here is that we can use a lot of text and a lot of explanations with some code, and it's just going to be a lot nicer to read than if we used VS Code. So that's just why we're choosing that. Okay, it's really taking a while for me. Let me know if it's loading for you.
Loads for me, but I have significantly less tabs open.
Okay, fine. I see what
Maybe
you're saying.
that's a fact.
You click new notebook and it should do something. So it's a little bit annoying. That's kind of the teaching effect, right? If you want to demonstrate something, it's just gonna refuse to work. But yes, you click create a new notebook. And if you're exploring this, you can also kind of open a sample and see what that looks like. It's really weird. I tried it earlier and it was fine. So
I can show it on my screen if you want.
yeah, if you want, because it's not really. Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, maybe go ahead.
Okay, so when I click it, I get this. Like I said, my computer's in default dark mode right now because it's after dark here. Yeah, so what did you want to show?
Okay, so I wanted to show basically that you have a box here that says enter cell code. So let's just enter a little calculation 1 + 3 or something, or whatever you want, Kyla. Yeah, exactly. And then we can run that. There are, I think, several ways of running that. I think you can just do, what is it on? Is it different on Mac? Is it Shift Enter or Control Enter? Yeah, and this is kind of typical. The first time you do something in a new notebook or in a new Julia script, it's going to take a little while and you'll think, wait, this is this fast new language, but it really is just the first the first time you do something with it, right? So each of these cells is a new code block. You can only do one line of code, so you can only do kind of one. We're just doing a couple of little calculations. If you try to add a line in the same code block, it'll complain and it'll actually help you resolve it, right? So if you do this and then try to run that.
And so I'm running this by pressing Shift Enter, or you can click this little play button.
Yes, that's how it works. Yeah. And I think the dark mode is just by default, Kyla, right? There's a question in the chat, but I think that's just your computer.
Yes, it's because my computer puts everything in dark mode after a certain time of night to help my eyes, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is maybe something you can set in your browser as well. I'm not sure. All right, so now we have these 2 lines in the box and it's complaining, says multiple expressions in one cell. And it gives you 2 automatic options to fix this. You can either split this up into 2 different cells. And that's actually what we're going to do. So if you click on that, Kyla, it's going to just split it into 2 cells. So it's going to help you kind of fix that. Okay. And what we can also do in this, so I kept saying, well, this is nice because it shows you a lot of text and now we're showing you lots of code. So how do you actually get text? So you can add a new block. You can add a new block here again by clicking on this plus. Okay, and now you can type in MD and then quotation marks. And then we can just say, welcome, I don't know, welcome to your first Pluto notebook. All right, and if we run that now, it'll show up as text. And you can see that this is going to all show up above the code block, right? So all the output, so all the calculation results and all this text is going to show up on top of the code block. So that's just something that Pluto does, and you just have to kind of get used to. So obviously, we don't really want to see this MD thing. So this is Markdown. This is similar to how it works in R Markdown, for example. I'll show you a couple of little tricks to use kind of italics and bold and headline formatting, so you can make a really pretty document. But of course, you don't really want to see this code, so you don't want to see this MD thing. So if you hover over it, you'll see this little I symbol. And if you click on that, the code will disappear. right? And now you just have this text output. And that just makes it look a bit nicer. You could also do this with other code. So say you have you're making a graph or something, and you only want people to see the graph. You're making a report of your research results, and you only want people to see the graph or some table or some model output, and you don't want them to see the code. You can hide any of these code elements by just clicking on this eye, and you can hide any of them, and then click again to show it again. And you probably caught Kyla doing this, but you can move these blocks around as you like. Yeah, so there's some text block that we added that makes sense to have it at the top of the screen because it says welcome. So we might as well, yeah, we can just drag and drop to move any cell up and down. So if you want to reorder something, that works. Okay, so speaking of this markdown stuff, if you go to your text block that you have at the top, so this welcome, let's make this a headline. So we have to show the code again to actually change stuff in it. And if you add a hashtag and a space, just one hashtag and a space. Yeah, and then I think you have to run it again to change it. And you can see that it changed the formatting to make it a big heading, right? So then you can hide it again if you want. That's actually pretty nice looking. So this hashtag and then space, that creates kind of a first level headline. We can make a smaller headline by using 2 hashtags, and then an even smaller by using 3, and so on. Right, so you can do 2 hashtags, smaller headline. There you go. Yeah, run it. And you can see it's a bit smaller. And then we also, what's also really nice is, yeah, can also show this even smaller headline. Yeah. And what you can also do with this markdown formatting is use bold and italics. So let's maybe show that in a new text block. And italics, you can either use 1 asterisk around a word, or you can use underscores. They should both work, I think. Yeah. And then bold is 2 asterisks. Yeah, so you can see that works. That puts the word, or you can also do this for several words, just puts it in italics. And then 2 asterisks is bold. All right, so this is just some little formatting tricks that you can use in Pluto. And then for text, you can just always hide your code because it's not really, yeah, it's not all that useful to really show that. But if you see someone else's notebook and you're wondering, oh, how did they achieve this cool effect? How did they put that formula in, or that emoji or whatever? You can click on this crossed out eye symbol to see what their code was and how they did it. So that's really useful. Okay. And then one more cool thing, maybe you can add a new code block at the end, Kyla, and just write in a equals 3. So this is a variable that we're creating here. And we'll talk more about variables in some other time, but at the moment, what all this means is that whenever Julia sees A, it's going to replace that with 3. So let's make a new code block and write A plus 1 and run that. So A plus 1 and run it. And you can see Julia added 3 plus 1 is 4, and it gives you 4 as the output. Okay. So what Pluto does is if you change the value of a variable, so can you just write or replace the 3 with 6 or something, some other number, and then run it again. So you can see it changed the result in this little calculation we have to 7, because it knows, even though we didn't run the A plus 1 line, we just ran the A equals 500 or A equals 6 line, but it knows that the assignment has changed. So it knows that this value of A has now changed. We now want it to be 500. So then it updates it automatically in the entire notebook. So this is very useful. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we would like to use it for teaching. Yeah. And then if you go back to the top, Kyla, you can save these notebooks. Yeah, yeah, this will give you a path on your computer, and then you can kind of type it in. So this is a bit, it does work with kind of typing in paths, and you can save it wherever you like. And then on this kind of starting page that I showed you, where it says open from file, that's where you can open notebooks that you saved or notebooks that you got sent from someone, right? So you can open notebooks like that. You can save them like that, and you can open them like that. And I think it has like an auto save feature, so it's going to save your work whenever you add something new, so that you shouldn't really lose any progress. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
so
maybe
that's
one other thing,
sure.
how you delete a cell, you go over
Oh, yeah.
here to this little 3 dots. So here we have some messy stuff. I can go to these 3 dots and just delete a cell. And you can also disable it if you don't want it to be run. So if I don't want to be able to run, if I don't want this line to be run, I can disable it here. Yeah, just as a yeah, so I'll put this little notebook in our GitHub, even though you can see there's not that much interesting stuff here, but just for the notes about the headers and that. And we're going to be working a lot more with Pluto in the future, so we're going to get even better acquainted with Pluto, and of course with Julia. Yeah, that's about all that we have to show today. I think we're coming up on time. It seems like some of you may be in time zones where your lunch break is over. Some of you may be in time zones where you should go to sleep, if you're in India, for example. Yeah, we're really excited that you joined us today. And we're really looking forward to continuing to learn Julia and to getting into the nitty-gritty in the future. Let me see if I can just share this. Oh, okay, I close it. So our next one, I believe, is on March 17th. And please do follow us on Meetup, especially keep an eye out for the coffee meeting on the 27th. There's people there of all levels of experience with Julia, including people who have a lot of experience with Julia, but it's a very welcoming and fun group. We mostly just talk about what we're using Julia for, what we might want to use it for, anything cool we found. So we'd be happy to see you there.
All right. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining. We'll stop the